Hello. Welcome to the Environmental Update. I'm Brian Hoppy, and I serve as the chair of the Lower Merion Environmental Advisory Council, or EAC. The EAC, with the help of our friends here at Lower Merion TV, created this program to address environmental topics of concern within the township, to provide some helpful hints and other guidance to address environmental issues in our homes and on our properties, and to introduce you to some of the environmental leaders in our community. The Environmental Update airs quarterly and will focus on environmental issues we encounter during the winter, spring, summer, and fall. First, let's meet a couple additional members of the EAC. With me today are Mike Hayes and Dave Richmond. Mike and Dave, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Why don't we start with introducing yourselves. Let's talk a little bit about your profession and how long you've served on the EAC. Mike, why don't we start with you?
Well, it's great to be with you today, Brian. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to the residents and to share ideas. So my background is in journalism, actually. That's how I got involved with the environment. Started with my college newspaper, and I progressed on from there. Some years at the Mercury newspaper, and currently actually work in Ardmore at JPM, which is right down the road from here. And I've been on the EAC for a little bit over a year now.
Great. David, how about you?
I'm a relative newcomer, I guess the newest member of the Environmental Advisory Council. I joined this past fall. I practice law in Philadelphia with a corporate defense firm, and part of my practice over the last 42 years has been environmental. For about 15 years, I chaired our National Environmental Practice Group and hold the distinction, if distinction it be, of having co-chaired the Defense Coordinating Committee in the first Superfund case that was ever filed in this country. And that led to a career as a Superfund litigator in the 80s and 90s. But my practice has been a diverse one. In addition to my litigation, other professional activities, I've been involved in a number of public interest law firms in Philadelphia. I'm coming to the end of 8 years of leading the Pennsylvania Innocence Project, of which I'm a co-founder and very proud of. And if I can put in a plug for the Pennsylvania Innocence Project, the work of the mission of the Pennsylvania Innocence Project is to free people who have been incarcerated for crimes they didn't commit and to prevent future wrongful convictions.
That's extremely admirable. Thank you. Thank you, David. Can each of you tell the audience a little bit about why you joined the EAC?
Sure. I think it's extremely important for people to be involved, to stay informed. I joined the EAC mainly out of an interest to advance my own ideas in terms of bicycle-friendly communities, pedestrian-friendly communities, transit-oriented growth, and I felt like it was vital to be a voice in the process as this township continues to grow, and to advance whether it's recycling efforts, stormwater management. I just wanted to have a voice in the process.
Great. And how about you, David?
You know, there are a number of reasons, Brian. First of all, I was asked to apply, and it's awfully flattering to be asked to do something. Secondly, I've been something of a free rider as a long-time Lower Merion resident, but I've also had before me in very close proximity the example of my wife, Janet Perry, who in the 1990s served for 6 years as the president of the Lower Merion School Board. And I have to say that in a rich professional life, that was probably the most significant experience she had as a public servant. And so I'd hope to emulate her, and while this may not be as challenging as running the school district, the opportunity for public service presents itself. And I guess finally, I've become imbued with a deep concern over the issue of global warming and climate change, and serving on the council gives me an opportunity to bring home that concern to my fellow residents of Lower Merion to see if collectively we can do our part to combat it.
That's great. That ties right into my next question for you all. So, you know, as the EAC, we're tackling a number of environmental issues. We're working towards the implementation of the comprehensive plan. But from your perspective, what do you think the most important environmental issue is that we have to address, especially in the winter months? So David, why don't we start with you?
Well, tied up with my concern over, I guess, specifically greenhouse gas emissions, but more generally energy conservation, I'm interested in what I can do and what the rest of us, both residents and businesses, can do to minimize the consumption of energy. And thinking in terms of my own situation, try to itemize some of the things that I've done and that I haven't done that would reduce energy consumption and also save some money. So things as uncomplicated as having an energy audit, sealing windows. Mm-hmm. I have a wood-burning fireplace, and I am not as religious as I ought to be about shutting the damper after the fires has burned out. One thing we did do a few years ago was to install a programmable thermostat, and we're pretty good about programming it and seeing to it that the nighttime temperature and the temperature during the day when nobody is home is about 10 to 12 degrees lower than the temperature while we're at home. Hot water heater, I realize, can be turned down to a level that will, again, be more economical to operate by putting it at the warm level rather than the very hot. It also minimizes the risk of scalding, which is to the good. So there are a number of relatively easy measures that I can take and the rest of us can take that will have a favorable impact on the environment and on our individual economic lives.
Well, again, David, welcome to the EAC. Looking very much forward to working with you over the next 8 years.
Well, if I can't tell you how impressed I am and reassured by the competence of my colleagues on the board. It's great. It's great to be with the two of you and the other folks on the board.
Mike, how about you? What do you think the biggest environmental issue is we need to address as the EAC?
Just to start, I wanted to echo everything David said. It's really it's imperative that all townships and all counties and state governments take climate change as a very serious threat, because it is. But as in terms of the winter months, salt use is the number one thing on my mind at this particular time of year. We use between 15 and 22 million tons of salt each year. Obviously, we need it. We need to keep the streets safe. We need to keep our sidewalks safe. But what are some ways we can cut back on our salt use? That's kind of what I started to explore a little bit. There are some alternatives out there. For example, sugar beet juice, I've read, can be used on roads. Kitty litter can be used as traction, as well as, what else? Sand. Calcium chloride is used as a substitute. And you can also buy at a natural food store a salt-free de-icer, which can be used as well. Now, why should we try to minimize salt? Well, it's bad for aquatic life, right? So it's on the roadway. It's eventually going to make its way into streams and rivers, into other areas. So it's bad for aquatic life. It's bad for the circulation of our waterways, ponds and lakes. It's also bad for our cars. It corrodes the metal. And of course, it's not good for pets either. It gets on their feet. So there are certain things we can do, either at the home level, our own individual homes, or as a township, to try to cut back on that a little bit.
Well, thank you, Mike and David, and thank you for all your time and effort for volunteering with the Township's EAC. When we come back, we'll discuss salt use in more detail within the township, its effects on our streams, and what our residents can do to help. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Environmental Update. I'm Brian Hoppy, Chair of the Township's EAC. Joining me today is Chelsea Heck from the Lower Merion Conservancy and Dr. Steve Goldsmith of Villanova University. Welcome, Chelsea and Steve.
Thanks, Brian.
First question I have for both of you is, why is stormwater such an important issue for the township?
So in Lower Merion and Narberth, during a rain event, all of our water lands on the ground and naturally wants to go down into the natural ground. But because of a lot of development and impervious surfaces, that water then has to run off somewhere. So our system's designed to carry that water to our streams. So our streams and waterways are actually a part of our stormwater system. And
something else to take into consideration is everything that water is carrying with it. So anything that was on the street beforehand, whether it's road salts, oils, sediment, or garbage, is going directly into a stream where it can impact aquatic life. Also, the water itself is a contaminant because it actually can cause stream bank erosion, leading to private property damage or damage to infrastructure such as bridges and roads.
Also, all of our waterways are connected to our region's drinking water. So, for example, Mill Creek, which is the largest of our two larger streams, enters into the Schuylkill River just upstream of the Philadelphia Water Department's drinking water intake. And then also Indian Creek, that starts in Narberth, winds its way into Philadelphia and joins Cobbs Creek, which then enters into the Delaware River. So our drinking water sources are also affected by our waterways in this area.
So you mentioned Mill Creek, and Steve, I understand that there's a study underway in Mill Creek. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, thanks for asking. Villanova environmental science students, along with the Lower Merion Conservancy, have actually been collaborating and sampling the Mill Creek for over 4 years now. And we've learned a lot during that time, particularly with regards to road salts and how they're getting into the stream. I think we've actually gone out and sampled during a snowmelt event, and actually the water coming out of a storm drain into the creek, and found chloride levels 1/3 of that you would find in seawater, which basically means we're putting diluted stream seawater into the Mill Creek during the winter months, and obviously that's going to have an impact on anything that's living in it. We see elevated chloride levels typically after the first snowmelt event in December, and that lasts all the way till March. And those are levels above the US EPA threshold for impacting aquatic organisms. And we actually see those elevated chloride levels throughout the year, which means that the salt is just lingering in the system. On the good news front, we've actually, with the help of the HDR Foundation, we've actually in place 3 permanent water monitoring stations in the Mill Creek that allow us to get instantaneous measurements of chloride, sediment, as well as how much water is flowing through the Mill Creek at any given point in time. We're actually going to be putting that data on the LMC's website during the winter months, and we hope that it'll be an education endeavor for the community. They can actually see how much salt is getting into the stream, how quickly it is entering the stream, and hopefully that will be some sort of motivation for maybe applying less salts on their properties going forward.
So will that be live data, or will it be daily or weekly updates?
Good question. So it won't be necessarily live data, but we will be downloading it kind of on a weekly basis and then uploading it onto the LMC's website. So there'll be a little time delay, but hopefully not too much.
And along with the research that Steve's doing, the Conservancy has about 20 years of data on Mill Creek in particular, and has started to also monitor Indian Creek in the last couple years. And so we have citizen scientists that go out monthly and collect data, as well as our staff member, Tom Clark, goes out. So we sort of have 3 levels of data collection: the citizen scientists doing sort of the older school test kits, and then our staff member doing a little higher using a scientific probe, and then we've got Steve's research that's with expensive machinery.
Expensive machinery.
So it's been neat to see that we do get sort of the same information, but we're just getting more data from Steve's work, and so all of that can be used to sort of as an educational tool. And then also we're working with the Academy of Natural Sciences and the William Penn Foundation to sort of share that work across various research centers.
Excellent. And then, Steve, with the work that's being done in Mill Creek, you have a group of students, you said,
Yes.
that are out there. What kind of coursework? What kind of majors are they undertaking?
Sure. They're all environmental science majors within our department, and typically the ones that get involved in research are upper level students, typically seniors. So they have a required senior project, and this is an excellent opportunity for them to get real world experience going out and sampling streams, and actually working with local NGOs such as the LMC and even the Township. By sharing this data, I think it gives them confidence with regards to whatever step they take after they graduate.
And I'm sure, Chelsea, with the staff at the Conservancy, there's only so much you can do. So how big of a volunteer force does the Conservancy have?
So right now we have about 15 people that are in the stream regularly, and then for our stream watch monitoring, and then we also have some other monitoring. We've got a bird watch program, that sort of does tie into our watersheds and our waterways, our habitat. So we do have volunteers. There's about 8 of them that go out monthly and monitor bird populations and what species they're seeing. So we're just, we're a small volunteer group, but it's a very dedicated one. And it's been something that we're trying to build, so we're always looking for more volunteers.
So, Chelsea, the Conservancy has a school program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we work with several schools in the area. One of those is Greenwood's Charter School in Philadelphia, and they actually come out for a year-long, what we kind of call an immersion program, and it's all watershed-based. But then we tie it into sort of the rich water history that we have in Lower Merion, so our milling industries, and also just Flat Rock Dam, so damming history in our waterways. And it's been a great experience that the kids start out with sort of a very basic introduction to watersheds, and then they get a chance to actually study it and come to Rolling Hill Park, which is a great example of a giant valley and a hill. So they'll spend 5 full-day programs in the park, and everything from just hiking and getting a feel for the landscape, and then also the milling history and what that meant to the water systems and how polluted our water systems were because of those. And then sort of joining that to the Philadelphia history and how our water has actually shaped the way that our communities has been built.
Okay, so the next question is really either one of you can respond. What can our residents do within the township during the winter to reduce the impacts to stormwater?
Yeah, so it's hard to, everybody during a snow event wants to be safe. And so definitely making sure that pathways are cleared, but making smarter decisions that maybe you don't need every pathway to your house cleared. Pick one with the least number of steps so that you can either use less salt or no salt at all on your property. There are other alternates, sand, kitty litter, but then again, those do all flow into the stream during the snow melt. Also helping your neighbors. We do have a large elderly population in the community, and so it's a great opportunity for you to get to know your neighbors, is to go out and help them. And there is an ordinance that you need to keep your sidewalks clear, so paying attention to that. We also have a lot of private roadways in Lower Merion and Narberth, and each one of those roadways is required to hire an outside contractor to do the salting and plowing. So having a conversation with that company, asking them to be a little bit more aware of the weather. Oftentimes, as soon as you hear storms coming, the salt trucks are out. And then nothing happens. And that salt will inevitably end up into the creek. So being a little bit liberal with their spraying of salt. And then also during a big event, stay home. Our township and municipalities work really hard to keep our roadways clear for public safety reasons, but for emergency vehicles and folks that have to get out. So by staying indoors, you take a little bit of pressure off of them so that they can continue to do their job that they do well.
So Steve, is there anything that Villanova University does during the winter months to reduce the impacts to the environment?
Yes, we have a pretty proactive buildings and grounds department on campus, and they actually take a lot of the advice that Chelsea offered with regards to more judicious application of road salts, and particularly watching the weather to make sure you don't apply them and an event doesn't come. We also put on some alternative solutions such as calcium acetate to some surfaces in our parking garages that have a less impact on the environment if they run off and get into streams. And also all of Villanova's stormwater actually flows into an artificial wetlands on campus that has actually been shown to filter out some of that salt before it actually enters into the Mill Creek.
And that's also another great piece of advice for residents is something like rain gardens, which is a way to hold stormwater on your property and allow it to sort of seep into the ground naturally. And they have shown studies that it also helps some of the contaminants that are in the water get filtered out or held in the plant roots. So,
excellent. Well, Chelsea and Steve, thank you for joining me today and for sharing a lot of great information on what the Conservancy and Villanova University are doing and what our residents can do to reduce the impacts of their daily activities on stormwater. I'm Brian Hoppy, Chair of the Lower Merion EAC. Thank you for joining us for the winter edition of the Environmental Update. If you have any suggested topics for future episodes or have a question on an environmental issue, please email us at the address below. Thank you, and see you again in the spring.